Okay, so we're diving into Uncle Tom's Cabin. It wasn't just a book, it was a cultural earthquake. I mean, you've heard the title, but what's the real story? Why did this book, of all books, spark debates, even influence a president, and sell millions?
Well, it's fascinating because Harriet Beecher Stowe, the author, didn't set out to write some political treatise. She took this very abstract concept of slavery and made it deeply personal for readers, brought them face to face with the human cost of this system, through these vivid characters and scenes, just heart-wrenching.
We're going to try to do the same for you today. We're diving deep into selections from an 1852 London edition of Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we've also got some insights about Stowe herself from the introduction and a separate essay about her family.
That context is key because Stowe came from this family steeped in social reform. Her father, Lyman Beecher, was this fiery preacher, railing against societal ills. He even debated pro-slavery folks publicly.
So she kind of inherited this activist spirit and channeled it into her writing.
Exactly. Uncle Tom's Cabin became her platform to expose the horrors of slavery, and she didn't shy away from the brutal realities. Take the scene where Hagar, a slave mother, is separated from her child at auction.
Oh, I remember that scene. So gut-wrenching. You can almost hear her cries as she's pulled away from her child.
It's strategic cruelty. Stowe doesn't just show us the grief, she reveals the calculated thinking of the slave traders. Haley, the trader, actually talks about how separating families makes the slaves more compliant, easier to control.
It's like they're trying to break their spirits, to rob them not just of their freedom, but their very humanity.
Precisely. And this dehumanization is woven into the fabric of slavery. We see it again in George Harris's story. He's a skilled worker, but his intelligence, talent, completely disregarded because of his race.
Denied basic rights, denied dignity, all because of the color of his skin.
And Stowe uses Haley again, the slave trader, to articulate this chilling logic. He argues that treating slaves with even a little humanity is bad for business.
That's a chilling thought. It's like saying compassion is a liability.
Yeah, and it forces us to ask, how could such a system exist? How could people justify such cruelty? Which brings us to the novel's exploration of Christianity and morality.
Because we see both the sincere faith of characters like Uncle Tom and these twisted interpretations used by slave owners to justify their actions.
Exactly. It's this jarring contrast. We see Mr. Shelby, the slave owner, trying to rationalize selling Tom to pay off his debts. He sees it as an economic necessity. But his wife, Mrs. Shelby, sees the moral wrongness of it, argues passionately against it.
It's like she represents this voice of conscience, reminding us that no economic argument can justify treating human beings as property.
And on the other side, you have the Quaker community. They risk everything to help Eliza and her child escape.
Really highlighting the power of faith in action, the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's dangerous.
It directly challenges that hypocrisy of those who twist religion to suit their own interests. Now, in the midst of all this darkness and brutality, Stowe also shows us the power of love and compassion, and she does this most strikingly through the character of Eva.
Little Eva, the angelic child, such a pure, innocent presence.
Eva sees beyond those racial divisions of her time. She treats everyone with kindness, respect, recognizing this shared humanity in us all.
And this is in direct contrast to her mother, Marie, who embodies this selfishness and indifference. It's fascinating how Stowe sets up these opposing forces, but within one family, showing how even those closest to each other can have drastically different views on something as fundamental as human dignity.
It speaks to that broader societal conflict, the clash between those who embrace love and compassion and those who cling to prejudice and cruelty.
And Stowe uses her characters masterfully to embody these conflicting forces. Each character, from the saintly Uncle Tom to the villainous Simon Legree, becomes a vessel for exploring the complexities of slavery and its impact on human lives.
Speaking of Uncle Tom, he's often misunderstood, reduced to a stereotype. But Stowe gives us a much more nuanced, complex character.
Right, he's not just a passive, pious figure. He's a man of deep faith, yes, but also incredible strength, resilience. He chooses to endure suffering rather than compromise his morals.
And his faith is a source of profound inner strength, allows him to forgive those who wrong him, to find hope even in the darkest of circumstances.
And then there's Simon Legree, just the embodiment of pure evil. He represents the darkest aspects of the slave system, driven by greed and sadism. His cruelty isn't random, it's calculated, a way to maintain power and control over those he deems beneath them.
Legree's character is crucial because it forces us to confront this potential for human beings to inflict just unimaginable suffering on one another. He's a warning, a reminder of what can happen when power is unchecked by morality or compassion.
And his actions highlight the systemic nature of the problem. It's not just about individual acts of cruelty. It's about a system that dehumanizes an entire group of people, making it easier for those in power to exploit and abuse them.
And it makes you wonder, how did people reconcile their faith with the horrors they witnessed? Stowe digs deep into that question.
Yeah, she shows us this internal struggle, the moral compromises that people made.
Take Mr. Shelby, the slave owner who sells Tom. He's not a monster like Legree, but he's still complicit in the system. He tries to justify his actions by saying he had no other choice.
But his wife challenges him, pointing out this inherent immorality of treating human beings as property. She argues that no economic justification can erase the sin of slavery.
And then there's Miss Ophelia, this northern woman who comes to the South with strong abolitionist views, but she struggles to truly connect with the enslaved people she encounters.
It's like her head understands the injustice, but her heart hasn't fully grasped the human cost.
And this is where Stowe's genius lies. She doesn't offer easy answers or, simplistic moral judgments. She forces us to confront the complexities of human nature, the ways in which even good intentions can be twisted and manipulated within a corrupt system.
And she does this by weaving together these incredibly powerful stories. It's not just about abstract ideas, it's about real people, their families, their dreams, their struggles.
And Stowe uses this emotional appeal masterfully. She draws you into these characters' lives, makes you feel their pain, their joy, their fear. She doesn't shy away from those brutal realities, but she also shows us the resilience of the human spirit, that capacity for love and compassion, even in the darkest of circumstances.
And that's what makes Uncle Tom's Cabin more than just a historical document. It's a timeless story about humanity, empathy, and this fight against injustice.
And speaking of fighting against injustice, this book wasn't just a good read, it was a catalyst for change.
It's amazing to think how one book could have such a monumental impact. It really sparked a movement.
Absolutely. Stowe's words sparked outrage, fueled that abolitionist movement, and ultimately contributed to the social and political upheaval that led to the Civil War.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, the power of empathy, and the power of one voice to challenge the status quo and inspire change.
And to dive even deeper into that impact, we need to understand the context of the time. The 1850s were a powder keg of tension over slavery.
Right. The country was deeply divided, and Uncle Tom's Cabin poured fuel on that fire.
Exactly. But to understand why it resonated so deeply, we need to look closely at Stowe's narrative style, her masterful use of emotional appeal, and the specific ways in which she challenged the prevailing views of her time.
So let's delve into that. Let's unpack the elements that made this book not just a bestseller, but a cultural force that helped to change the course of history.
Let's start with the book's opening chapters, where Stowe paints this vivid picture of the slave trade and those dehumanizing practices that were at its core.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Stowe doesn't just tell us that slavery is bad, she shows us.
And she does this through this series of incredibly powerful scenes. The separation of families, the brutal treatment of slaves, the casual indifference of those who profit from the system, it's all laid bare with a rawness and honesty that was just shocking for readers at the time.
And one of the most striking things is how she portrays the psychological impact of slavery. It's not just about the physical hardship, but the constant fear, the erosion of hope, the way it crushes the spirit.
Exactly. Think about Eliza's flight across that frozen Ohio River. That scene is terrifying on a physical level, but what really stays with you is the emotional intensity, the desperate fear of a mother being separated from her child.
And that fear is a constant undercurrent in the lives of the slaves. They never know what tomorrow will bring, never feel truly safe because their fate rests in the hands of others who see them as property, not people.
And this is where Stowe's understanding of human nature comes into play. She recognizes that slavery is not just about economics or politics. It's about power and control. It's about the deliberate dehumanization of an entire group of people in order to justify their exploitation.
And she doesn't shy away from showing that psychological toll that this takes on both the slaves and the slave owners.
We see the ways in which the system warps and distorts human relationships, creating this climate of fear, suspicion, and resentment.
And this is one of the things that makes Uncle Tom's Cabin so powerful. It's not just an abstract condemnation of slavery, it's a deep dive into the human heart, exploring the ways in which both individuals and systems can be complicit in perpetuating injustice.
Now, another key element of Stowe's narrative style is her use of emotional appeal. She doesn't just present facts and arguments, she crafts scenes that are designed to evoke strong emotions in the reader.
Like the scene where Uncle Tom is whipped nearly to death.
Exactly. It's brutal, it's heart-wrenching, and it's meant to make the reader feel the horror of slavery on this visceral level.
She wants you to experience the pain, the outrage, the injustice of it all.
And she does this masterfully, using vivid language, sensory details, and a deep understanding of human psychology to create scenes that are both moving and unforgettable.
It's like she's saying, this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like, this is what you are supporting if you condone this system.
And that message resonated deeply with readers, particularly in the North, where abolitionist sentiment was growing, but still lacked that widespread moral outrage that Stowe's book helped to ignite.
The book became a rallying cry, a touchstone for those who believed that slavery was this moral abomination that needed to be abolished.
It wasn't just a book, it was a movement. People were organizing reading groups, holding public discussions, and using the novel as a tool to educate others about the realities of slavery.
It's amazing to think how one book could have such a profound impact on society.
It speaks to the power of art, the power of storytelling, and the power of empathy to spark change.
And it's not just about the content of the book, but also Stowe's narrative style. She masterfully blended fiction with elements of reality, drawing on personal accounts, historical events, and even biblical parables to create this sense of authenticity and urgency.
This made the novel incredibly accessible to a wide audience. It wasn't just for intellectuals or those already immersed in the abolitionist movement. It was for everyday people who were suddenly confronted with the human cost of slavery in a way they had never considered before.
It's like she was saying, this is not just a story, this is happening right now, and it's up to you to do something about it.
And that message struck a chord, sparking a wave of activism and moral outrage that had a profound impact on the political landscape.
The book became a focal point in this heated debate over slavery, further dividing the nation along moral and ideological lines.
It's no exaggeration to say that Uncle Tom's Cabin played a significant role in the lead-up to the Civil War. It helped to crystallize those moral arguments against slavery, galvanizing public opinion, and putting pressure on politicians to take action.
It's a reminder that words have power, stories have power, and even one person can make a difference in the fight for justice.
And as we delve deeper into Uncle Tom's Cabin, we'll see just how skillfully Stowe wielded that power. Using her words to expose the evils of slavery, to stir the conscience of a nation, and to inspire a movement that would ultimately help to bring about one of the most significant social and political transformations in American history.
So let's continue our deep dive. Let's explore the ways in which Stowe brings these themes to life through her characters, her language, and her masterful storytelling.
And let's consider how this book, written over 170 years ago, continues to speak to us today, challenging us to confront the injustices of our own time and to work towards a more just and compassionate world.
Now, to really grasp the impact of Uncle Tom's Cabin, we need to spend some time immersed in that world that Stowe creates.
We need to feel the weight of slavery's cruelty, understand the moral dilemmas it posed, and witness the power of love and compassion in the face of such darkness.
So for the next 10 minutes or so, let's dive deep into the heart of this story. Let's explore the scenes that shocked readers, the characters who became cultural icons, and the emotional power that made this book a catalyst for change.
And let's begin with the most harrowing aspect of the book, Stowe's unflinching depiction of slavery's evils. She lays bare the system's cruelty not through dry statistics or political arguments, but through vivid, heart-wrenching scenes that sear themselves into the reader's memory.
One scene that I found particularly impactful was the separation of Hagar and her child at the auction.
Yes, that scene is a gut punch. Stowe doesn't just describe the event, she makes you feel the agony of that moment, the raw, primal grief of a mother being torn from her child.
We hear Hagar's cries, her desperate pleas, and we see this cold indifference of the men who are buying and selling human beings as if they were livestock.
And what makes this scene even more powerful is that it's not an isolated incident. Stowe weaves these kinds of separations throughout the story, showing how the breaking up of families was this deliberate and systematic practice designed to crush the spirits of slaves and make them more compliant.
It's a chilling realization. It's like they're trying to destroy the very fabric of human connection, to rob them not just of their freedom, but of their love, their family, their identity.
And this deliberate dehumanization is further emphasized in the way Stowe portrays the physical and psychological abuse inflicted upon slaves. We see whippings, beatings, other forms of torture, all carried out with this casual cruelty that is both horrifying and sickening.
One scene that I found particularly difficult to read was the description of Uncle Tom being whipped nearly to death by Simon Legree.
That scene is a testament to Stowe's willingness to confront the brutality of slavery head-on. She doesn't shy away from the violence, the pain, the sheer barbarity of it all.
And it's not just the physical abuse, it's the psychological manipulation, the constant fear, the way in which the system is designed to break people's spirits and make them feel utterly powerless.
Think about the way slaves are denied education, forbidden from learning to read or write.
Right, it's a way of controlling them, keeping them ignorant and dependent.
And it's also a way of denying their humanity, treating them as less than human.
And this theme of dehumanization is woven throughout the entire book. We see it in the language used to describe slaves, the way they're bought and sold like commodities, the way their individuality is erased and their lives are reduced to mere labor.
And it's in this context, in this world of unimaginable cruelty and dehumanization, that Stowe's exploration of love and compassion becomes even more powerful.
Because even in the darkest of places, she shows us glimpses of hope, moments of human connection that defy the brutality of the system.
And she does this through characters like Eva, the angelic child who sees no difference between black and white, slave and free.
Eva's love is unconditional, untainted by the prejudices of her time. She treats everyone with kindness and respect, recognizing the shared humanity in us all.
And her presence in the story is like a beacon of light, a reminder that even in the midst of such darkness, there's still that possibility for love and compassion to shine through.
And then there's Uncle Tom himself, a man who endures unimaginable suffering but never loses his faith, his dignity, or his capacity for love and forgiveness.
Tom's character is often misunderstood, reduced to a stereotype of passivity and subservience. But Stowe gives us a much more nuanced and complex individual.
He's a man of deep faith, yes, but also incredible strength and resilience. He chooses to endure hardship rather than betray his beliefs or compromise his morals.
And his faith is not a blind acceptance of his circumstances, but rather a source of profound inner strength that allows him to find hope even in the darkest of times.
And this is one of the most remarkable things about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Even as Stowe exposes the horrors of slavery, she also reminds us of the enduring power of the human spirit to resist, to love, and to hope, even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
And she does this by weaving together these powerful themes through her characters' lives and actions.
It's not just about abstract ideas. It's about real people, their families, their dreams, their struggles. And it's through their stories that we come to understand the true cost of slavery, not just in terms of economics or politics, but in terms of human lives, broken hearts, and stolen dreams.
And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore these stories in more detail. We'll delve into the complexities of characters like Uncle Tom, Eva, and Simon Legree.
We'll examine the ways in which Stowe uses language and imagery to evoke strong emotions in her readers.
And we'll consider how this book, written over 170 years ago, continues to resonate with us today, challenging us to confront the injustices of our own time and to work towards a more just and compassionate world.
But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer power of Stowe's storytelling. Her ability to transport us to another time and place, to make us feel the weight of history, and to remind us of the enduring importance of empathy, compassion, and the fight for justice.
You know, diving into those early chapters, it really struck me how Stowe uses that auction scene to expose the economic logic, the logic that drives the slave trade.
It's like she's peeling back those layers, showing us that it's not just about individual cruelty, but a whole system designed to profit from human suffering.
Exactly. Haley, the slave trader, explains his method so casually, so matter-of-factly. He's talking about how separating families makes slaves more manageable, more profitable.
It's chilling because he's not some monstrous caricature. He's presented as this shrewd businessman, and that just makes his callousness even more disturbing.
It forces you to confront that banality of evil, how something as horrific as slavery could be normalized, seen as just another business transaction.
And this normalization is further emphasized through the character of Mr. Shelby. Seems like a decent guy on the surface, but he still participates in the system. He even tries to convince himself that selling Tom is like an act of kindness.
He embodies that internal struggle, those moral compromises that people made to justify their complicity in slavery. And it's through his internal conflict that Stowe challenges the reader, to examine their own beliefs.
Because if a seemingly good man like Mr. Shelby can succumb to the lure of profit over principle, what does that say about the rest of us?
It's a powerful indictment, not just of individual slave owners, but of the entire system that allowed those moral compromises to flourish.
And then we have, like the other side of the coin, those who actively resist slavery driven by their faith and this deep sense of justice. The Quakers stand out as such a shining example.
Yeah, their unwavering commitment to helping Eliza and her child escape is so inspiring. I mean, they put everything on the line, their livelihoods, their safety, all to help strangers in need.
It's a testament to the power of faith in action. That belief that one must not just talk about morality, but actually live it.
And there's such a direct contrast to the slave owners who twist religion to serve their own interests. Their actions really highlight the hypocrisy of using Christianity to justify slavery.
Which brings us to Uncle Tom. He's often, reduced to a stereotype, but in the book, he's a much more complex and fascinating character.
Absolutely. He's not just pious and submissive. He's a man of deep inner strength. He faces impossible choices with grace and dignity.
Yeah, his faith isn't about blind obedience. It's his source of resilience in the face of, unimaginable suffering.
And it's worth noting that his faith isn't static. It evolves throughout the story as he grapples with his circumstances.
Oh, there's that scene where he questions God, asking why he's been abandoned to such suffering. It's a raw, honest moment that humanizes him, makes his faith feel so real and relatable.
And it's through those moments of questioning, those struggles with doubt, that his faith ultimately becomes stronger.
It's not about finding easy answers or pretending that everything is okay. It's about finding the strength to endure, to hope, and to love, even in the face of this overwhelming darkness.
And this is where the character of Eva comes in. Her innocence and unconditional love stand in such stark contrast to the cruelty that surrounds her.
She's like this beacon of light, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's still the possibility for goodness and compassion.
And her death is such a pivotal moment in the story. It just shatters the illusion that love alone can conquer evil. It forces the characters and the reader to confront those harsh realities of the world.
It's a reminder that even the purest love can be fragile, that injustice can triumph, and that the fight for a better world is often fraught with heartbreak and loss.
But even in her death, Eva leaves behind this legacy of love and hope. Her impact on those around her, particularly Uncle Tom, is profound. She inspires them to continue that fight for justice, to strive for a world where her vision of love and equality can actually become a reality.
And this is where Stowe's genius as a writer really shines through. She doesn't offer easy answers or simplistic solutions. She presents a world that is complex, messy, and often heartbreaking.
But within that complexity, she also offers this powerful message of hope. A hope that is rooted in the belief that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, the human spirit can endure, that love can conquer hate, and that the fight for justice is a fight worth fighting.
And that fight is often most powerful when it's fueled by those personal stories, individual voices that cut through the abstract arguments and statistics.
And that's precisely what Stowe achieved with Uncle Tom's Cabin. She took the very abstract concept of slavery and made it deeply personal for her readers.
She introduced them to characters they could care about, families they could sympathize with, stories that broke their hearts and ignited their outrage.
And it's through those individual stories, those human connections, that she managed to galvanize a movement, to spark a national conversation, and to ultimately contribute to one of the most significant social and political transformations in American history.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, the power of empathy, and the power of one voice to challenge injustice and inspire change.
Now, to fully appreciate the impact of Uncle Tom's Cabin, we need to kind of delve into that historical context in which it was written. The 1850s were a time of immense social and political upheaval in the United States.
Right. The nation was deeply divided over the issue of slavery, and tensions were running high.
Exactly. And the publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852 just poured fuel on that fire, became an instant bestseller, selling over 300,000 copies in its first year alone.
That's an incredible number for that time.
It was unprecedented. And it wasn't just a northern phenomenon. The book was read widely in the South as well, although it was met with fierce criticism and attempts at censorship.
It's like the book held up a mirror to American society, forcing people to confront the realities of slavery and those moral compromises that sustained it.
And that confrontation was deeply unsettling for many, both in the North and the South.
It challenged deeply held beliefs, disrupted social norms, and just ignited passions on both sides of that slavery debate.
Some saw it as a powerful indictment of slavery, a call to action for those who believed in justice and equality.
Others saw it as a threat to their way of life, an attack on their values and their very identity.
And the book's impact went far beyond the realm of, intellectual debate, sparked real-world consequences.
It galvanized that abolitionist movement, leading to a surge in membership and support for anti-slavery organizations.
It inspired acts of resistance, including the Underground Railroad, which helped slaves escape to freedom in the North.
And it played this crucial role in shaping public opinion, making it increasingly difficult for politicians to ignore the moral implications of slavery.
Some historians even argue that Uncle Tom's Cabin was a contributing factor to the outbreak of the Civil War, helping to push the nation towards its inevitable reckoning with the issue of slavery.
It's remarkable to think that a single book could have such a profound impact on history.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, the power of empathy, and the power of one voice to challenge injustice and inspire change.
And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore the specific ways in which Uncle Tom's Cabin influenced that abolitionist movement, shaped public opinion, and contributed to the social and political upheaval that led to the Civil War.
We'll examine the book's reception in both the North and the South, analyzing the different ways in which it was interpreted and the various reactions it provoked.
And we'll consider how this book, written over 170 years ago, continues to resonate with us today, challenging us to confront the injustices of our own time and to work towards a more just and compassionate world.
But before we delve into those aspects of the book's legacy, let's take a closer look at some of those key characters who bring these themes to life. Those individuals whose stories captivated readers and whose fates continue to haunt us long after we finish reading that last page.
Because it's through these characters, their joys and sorrows, their struggles and triumphs, that we come to understand the true human cost of slavery and that enduring power of the human spirit to resist, to love, and to hope, even in the face of unimaginable adversity.
Let's start with the character who has become synonymous with the book itself, though often misunderstood, Uncle Tom. He's a figure who has been both celebrated and criticized, a symbol of both resilience and subservience.
But in Stowe's hands, he's much more than just a symbol. He's this complex and nuanced individual, a man of deep faith, quiet strength, and unwavering compassion.
Let's delve into his story, explore the choices he makes, the burdens he bears, and the legacy he leaves behind.
Because in understanding Uncle Tom, we come to understand not only the horrors of slavery, but also the enduring power of the human spirit to find hope and meaning, even in the darkest of times. One of the things that struck me about Uncle Tom is his faith. It isn't this simplistic, unyielding thing. He actually wrestles with God, questions his fate.
Yeah, and that's what makes his character so powerful. He's not just some, saintly caricature. He's a flesh and blood human being, grappling with this unimaginable suffering.
There's that scene where he's been sold to Legree, and he cries out, "Oh, Lord, what have I done that this should come upon me?" You can just feel the weight of his despair, his sense of abandonment.
And that struggle makes his faith even more meaningful, right? He doesn't just arrive at these easy answers. He wrestles with doubt, with anger, with the temptation to just give in to despair.
But ultimately, his faith is what sustains him, gives him the strength to endure, to find those moments of grace, even in the midst of all that brutality.
And that's what sets him apart from a character like Simon Legree. Legree's all about power, control, dominance. He represents those darkest impulses of human nature, unrestrained by any sense of morality, compassion.
He's almost like a force of nature, this whirlwind of cruelty and destruction.
And Stowe uses him to expose the corrupting influence of power, the way it can twist even those who might have started with good intentions.
Like Mr. Shelby. He's not inherently evil like Legree, but he's still complicit in the system. He chooses profit over principle, ultimately selling Tom to satisfy his own financial needs.
And it's that compromise, that willingness to turn a blind eye to injustice for personal gain. That's what Stowe is challenging. She's showing how even seemingly good people can become complicit in these systems of oppression.
It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to examine our own choices, to ask ourselves whether we're contributing to the problem or working towards a solution.
Right, and this brings us back to the book's legacy. Uncle Tom's Cabin wasn't just a bestseller, it was this cultural phenomenon, ignited a movement.
It sparked debates, fueled activism, even influenced the course of history.
What's remarkable is how Stowe, a seemingly ordinary woman, managed to tap into this cultural nerve to give voice to the voiceless in a way that resonated with millions of people.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, the power of empathy, the power of one voice to challenge injustice and inspire change.
And it's not just a historical artifact, The themes of Uncle Tom's Cabin, the abuse of power, the struggle for freedom, that search for dignity, those resonate just as strongly today.
Absolutely. We may not have legal slavery in the same way, but there are just countless forms of exploitation, oppression that exist in our world, both blatant and subtle.
And that's why Uncle Tom's Cabin remains relevant. It challenges us to confront the slaveries of our own time, to examine our own complicity in systems of injustice, and ask ourselves, what are we doing to break those chains?
It's a powerful call to action, a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing, and that we all have a role to play in creating a more equitable and compassionate world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Uncle Tom's Cabin, let's carry with us the book's enduring message. Let's remember that power of storytelling to open hearts and minds, to ignite compassion and inspire action.
And let's challenge ourselves to confront injustice wherever we find it, to speak out against oppression, and to work towards a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect.
Because, as Harriet Beecher Stowe so powerfully demonstrated, each of us has the potential to make a difference. Our voices matter, our stories matter. Our actions have the power to shape a more just and compassionate future.